Hello everyone, today I want to talk to you about an analysis from foreign media that says China's electric vehicles are 10 years ahead of the rest of the world. In addition, the US, Iran, and Israel all want a ceasefire. Iran even notifies the US in advance before attacking American military bases, and the US doesn't retaliate, instead loudly calling for peace. After 10 days of missiles flying between Israel and Iran, US President Donald Trump was the first to announce that a ceasefire between Israel and Iran was imminent. At 6:02 p.m. Eastern Time on June 13th, Trump posted on social media saying that the ceasefire between Israel and Iran would begin in about 6 hours, which means the ceasefire would start at midnight on June 24th, Eastern Time. He said Iran would initiate the first 12-hour ceasefire, followed by Israel entering the second 12-hour ceasefire, and after 24 hours, the war would officially end. Later, at around 1 a.m. on June 14th, Trump said the ceasefire was now in effect and warned not to violate it. Afterwards, both Israel and Iran separately confirmed the news of the ceasefire. On the morning of June 14th, the Israeli Prime Minister's office issued a statement saying that Israel confirmed it had agreed to the U.S. proposed bilateral ceasefire agreement with Iran, but would respond forcefully to any violations of the agreement. Israel's National Security Council also issued a statement on June 14th regarding the ceasefire, saying that Iran had forced Israel to unilaterally halt its aggression, but that it was prepared to respond decisively to any further acts of aggression. After the ceasefire agreement took effect, the Israel Defense Forces said that Iran had fired 2 ballistic missiles at Israel, both of which were intercepted. Subsequently, Israeli Defense Minister Katz also stated that he had instructed the Israel Defense Forces to respond forcefully to Iran's violation of the ceasefire agreement by launching heavy strikes on targets in downtown Tehran. According to Iran's official media ISNAV, the reports about Iran launching missile attacks on Israel after the ceasefire agreement took effect are false. Although there is still some minor exchange of fire between the two sides, it appears that Iran and Israel have indeed reached a ceasefire agreement under Trump's mediation. It's perfectly normal that Trump wants a ceasefire. The US deployed B-2 bombers to attack 3 Iranian facilities, but didn't really look into whether they had actually destroyed Iran's strategic assets. The US clearly rushed to declare victory after scoring just a minor success. They wanted a ceasefire from the start. Trump really doesn't want to get dragged into another Middle East war, so the previous B-2 bomber strikes were pretty much just for show. It's not surprising that Israel also wants a ceasefire. According to a Wall Street Journal report on June 13th, several Israeli and Arab officials revealed that Israel hopes to use the US airstrikes to put pressure on Iran and end the Israel-Iran conflict as soon as possible. The US has already informed Arab countries that Israel is seeking to end the conflict quickly and has asked them to pass this message on to Iran. These officials revealed that in response to the signals sent by Israel, Iran replied that they are not ready to back down yet, as they believe it is necessary to respond to the US airstrikes on their nuclear facilities. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Israel is very close to achieving his goals. He did not provide a specific timetable, but claimed that Israel would not allow itself to be dragged into a war of attrition. In fact, Israel is also tough on the outside but weak on the inside. Before the war, it predicted it would defeat the enemy in 3 days, but the fighting actually began on June 13th. 10 days later, Israel had already endured several rounds of desperate counterattacks from Iran. All 14 of Iran's missile brigades were fully mobilized, launching hundreds of Meteor and Mudstone missiles in a saturation attack on Israeli cities like Tel Aviv and Haifa. Although some of the missiles were intercepted by the Iron Dome defense system, dozens still struck military bases and critical infrastructure. The runway at Tel Aviv International Airport was blown apart, Israel's most important Weizmann Institute of Science was destroyed, the city's power supply system was left half paralyzed, and Israelis gradually had to take refuge in air raid shelters. Although Iran's missiles did not inflict fatal wounds on Israel, the missile barrage shattered the Israeli psychological sense of invincibility. They may develop war weariness and a desire for peace, pushing the United States to take the plunge and attack Iran's nuclear facilities, seemingly looking for a so-called successful way to back down. The last one who should be seeking peace is actually Iran, but its eagerness for peace is all too obvious. After the United States bombed Iran's nuclear facilities, Iran let it be known that they were not yet ready to back down, because they believed it was necessary to respond to the US airstrikes. It turns out that their response was an airstrike on a US military base. On the evening of June 13th, just before the ceasefire, Iran launched a missile attack on the U.S. Al Udeid Air Base, located about 350 kilometers southwest of Doha, the capital of Qatar. Al Udeid Air Base is one of the largest U.S. military bases overseas, with more than 10,000 American soldiers stationed there. However, after the attack, Trump expressed his gratitude for Iran notifying the U.S. in advance before launching the missile strike on the American airbase in Qatar. Trump also mentioned that, most importantly, Iran should properly handle matters related to this operation within their own system, hoping that no further hatred will arise in the future. We have to thank Iran for informing us in advance, which allowed us to avoid casualties. Trump laid his cards on the table, saying that Iran notified the U.S. before the airstrike on the American military base. By doing this, Iran was essentially following protocol by responding to the airstrike with a military action, without really expecting to inflict any real damage on the U.S. military, so it makes perfect sense for Trump to thank them. It can be summed up like this. First, Trump attacked Iran's nuclear facilities not really caring about the actual effect, but just to respond to the demands of the Israeli lobby, and then wrap things up quickly. Second, Israel isn't as afraid of pain as it might seem. When missiles were falling on Israeli cities, it turns out they knew how to ask for peace too. Third, Iran is even weaker, getting bullied right to their doorstep. American warplanes flew into Iranian territory to bomb them, but Iran still didn't dare to make any meaningful retaliation. They attacked U.S. bases, but even notified the Americans in advance. What's the point of attacking like that? From Iran's actions, it's clear that the predicament Iran is in now is entirely of its own making. If you lack resolve against your enemies, you'll eventually bring disaster upon yourself. On another note, I want to talk about Chinese electric vehicles. They're really impressive now. Even after facing heavy taxes in Europe, they're still grabbing a huge share of the market. In a couple of years, in Austria, the Chinese car brand BYD will bring big changes for Austrians like Hain. Hain is a car sales agent who has been selling Italian cars for the past 12 years. Ever since his company became BYD's sales agent in Austria 2 years ago, Hain says he's gradually become a fan of China. He's developed an interest in Chinese culture and cuisine, and he's especially fascinated by the Chinese mindset of doing whatever it takes to achieve their goals. In the interview, he described how this mindset among Chinese people stands in stark contrast to the relatively laid-back attitude of Europeans. In Europe, there are often goals, but sometimes the willpower needed to actually achieve them is lacking. This change is also visible to the naked eye. Just this past May, Hanid said that his car dealership, Schmidt-Berger, sold 40 BYD vehicles, while the total number of BYDs sold last year was only 58. In just 1 month, sales have nearly matched the entire previous year. 2 years ago, his company, Schmidt-Berger, became one of BYD's dealers in Austria. This family-run dealership is located in an Austrian state, and besides BYD, it also sells brands under Stellantis. Over the past 2 years, as a BYD salesperson, Hanid has witnessed how this Chinese car brand went from being ignored at first to gradually rising in prominence. He said that at the beginning, people felt uncertain about this Chinese brand and didn't know what might happen if they bought it. Hanid said that if someone had told him a year ago that BYD would be achieving its current monthly sales a year later, he definitely wouldn't have believed it. According to a report by the American BBC, at the beginning of the 21st century, China formulated a technological blueprint to lead the future. Automotive industry analyst Dunn said that China, once known as the Kingdom of Bicycles, has now become the global leader in the electric vehicle sector. In the field of electric vehicles, China is at least 10 years ahead of other countries, and its cost-performance ratio and technological level are 10 times that of others. Earlier this year, BYD surpassed its American rival Tesla, and now it already dominates the global electric vehicle market. China's huge domestic market, with its 1.4 billion people, has boosted BYD's sales, and now the company is actively expanding its overseas business. Meanwhile, many other Chinese electric vehicle startups have also set their sights on foreign mass markets, competing with high-cost performance models. The BBC asked, how is all of this achieved? Can China's leading advantage be surpassed? They trace the origins of China's electric vehicle dominance. Analysts credit Wang Gong for this achievement. He was once an engineer at Audi, and in 2007 became China's Minister of Science and Technology. At the time, Wang Gang pointed out that the good news was China had already become the world's largest car market. The bad news was that on the streets of Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, all the cars were foreign brands. Dunn recalls that at the time, Chinese brands couldn't compete with European, American, and Japanese carmakers in terms of quality and reputation. These companies had an unshakable first-mover advantage in the field of gasoline vehicles. However, China did have abundant resources, a skilled workforce, and a complete automotive supply chain. Dunn says that as a result, Wang Gang decided to change the rules of the game and shift to the electric vehicle track, turning it into a national-level strategic blueprint. Although the Chinese government included electric vehicles in its 5-year economic plan as early as 2001, it wasn't until 2010 that it began to drive industry development through massive subsidies. Unlike Western democracies, China has the ability to mobilize its vast economic resources over many years to achieve its goals. Its massive infrastructure projects and dominant position in manufacturing are further proof of this. Dunn emphasized that through long-term planning and government coordination, China has come to dominate key supply chains such as battery production and has built the world's largest public charging network. The density of charging stations in major cities ensures that drivers can always find a charging point. Now, if you manufacture car batteries, you simply can't avoid China's supply chain. Some people call this state capitalism. Western countries accuse this of being unfair competition. However, executives in China's electric vehicle industry insist that all companies operating in China, whether domestic or foreign, have access to the same resources. They believe that it is precisely fierce competition and a culture of innovation that have fueled the rapid growth of China's electric vehicle industry. Ku Hong, president of electric vehicle manufacturer XPeng, told the BBC that the Chinese government's approach is no different from that of Europe and the US, providing policy support, encouraging consumption, and investing in infrastructure. However, China has gone further and more thoroughly, truly cultivating a competitive market environment without favoring any particular company. The BBC also acknowledges that the United Nations has stated the transition to electric vehicles is crucial to avoiding a global climate disaster. China's dominant position should actually encourage Western governments that support the transition to new energy. Many countries, including the UK, plan to ban the sale of fuel-powered cars before 2030, and China is the one most capable of helping them achieve this goal. Dunn analyzes that China's policies are aimed at producing every car for the world. When the Chinese look around, they ask themselves, is there anyone who can make cars better than us? At this point, industry leaders in Detroit, Nagoya, Germany, and the UK can only admit they fall short. This is a new era. The Chinese are full of confidence about the future. After watching the BBC report, it can be summed up like this: the success of Chinese electric vehicles is due to the country's stable policies and long-term commitment to promoting EV development. But in the West, every government has its own set of policies. The Biden administration in the US supports electric vehicles, but if Trump comes to power, those policies are scrapped. Although the US was an early mover in electric vehicles, how can it compete with China's EVs in the future?